Jerry CADORETTE just destroyed Alex Krdecha 3-0 at East vs West 14. Many people, such as Devin Larratt, considered Alex to be the #1 contender to go up against Levan. And now that Jerry defeated Alex so easily, everyone is calling for a Jerry CADORETTE vs Levan SAGINASHVILI super match. But does Jerry really have a chance? In this video, we will analyze multiple Jerry and Levan matches in hopes of answering that question. Firstly, we're going to take a look at Jerry CADORETTE vs Gennady Quigvinya at East vs West. This match is important for multiple reasons, but firstly because Gennady Quigvinya is really strong. Gennady is one of Levan's training partners, and he has also matched a lot of the lifts Levan has done, or even broken them in the bicep lifts and elbow flexor lifts. And as we're able to see in this match, Jerry CADORETTE is doing a very good job of defeating Gennady's side pressure and his back pressure. But the second reason this match is so important to look at is because it demonstrates that Jerry CADORETTE is not just a presser, but Jerry really can do any move that he wants to without his wrist. Because as you can see in this match, Jerry does open with a press, or in other words, he opens with a lot of shoulder commitments, but as soon as Gennady rolls out, Jerry loses that shoulder commitments. Really, his shoulder and his hand are much more so in a line pointed toward Gennady rather than pointed toward the pin pad. And we see this even more clearly as Gennady begins to drive sideways. Notice the linearity between Jerry's hand and his shoulder. Jerry is not pressing at all at this point. He's really doing much more of a Todd Hutchings style move. What Jerry CADORETTE is using right now is more so just arm power. He's using back pressure and he's using side pressure to defeat Gennady Quigvinya, but he's not just using a press. And this is what separates Jerry from the rest of the pack of pressers in arm wrestling. A lot of pressers just don't have any kind of option if they can't get completely behind their shoulder. But as we see here with Jerry, Jerry can still pull even if he is outside of his shoulder. And not only this, but Jerry can literally be on his bicep, as we see in this moment right here. Jerry is totally on the losing side of the table. He's totally been over-rotated. He has lost all of his pronation, and he really is on his elbow flexor. But even still, even from this position, he is still able to defeat the incredible side pressure of Gennady Quigvinya and prevent the pin from taking place. So I find this to be really impressive, and this is going to be super important as we analyze some of the other matches. Next, we're going to look at probably the most important match we could look at when talking about a potential Jerry versus Levan match, and that is the Ermes Gasparini versus Levan SAGINASHVILI match. Now notice how, of course, Ermes is opening this match in much more of an outside move, but as we see, as the match goes on, he begins to transition to a more inside move, or really a move that looks a lot like a Jerry CADORETTE move. Ermes is not in a full press. He's not in a super shoulder committed position. He's really in that super ugly looking low grip flop press side pressure lane, and he's still using quite a bit of his elbow flexor as well. And I find this to be extremely interesting because the positions we see in this match actually look very similar to the positions we saw in the Jerry CADORETTE versus Gennady Quigvinya match. And as we see here, this position seems to give Levan a little bit of trouble, just like Jerry was able to give Gennady trouble in their match. And upon the restart of this round, we see the exact same thing, only Ermes transitions to more of that Jerry CADORETTE style, somewhere in between a Todd roll and a press, even earlier. And it's starting to cause Levan quite a bit of trouble. We begin to see Ermes rocking back and forth, and he's starting to go through Levan's bicep. And if this match continues, the efficiency is going to swing heavily in the favor of Ermes because Levan is using this muscle, which is going to pump up and gas out over time, whereas Ermes is using a much higher percentage of skeletal structure, which is not going to gas out over time. So as this continues, as this match goes on, you would expect Ermes to do better and better. And Jerry is going to attack Levan in the exact same way, where you would expect the efficiency to swing in his favor the longer that the match goes on. However, there is a problem with all of this, and that is in this moment right here. Jerry CADORETTE is not a top roller. Ermes Gasparini is a top roller. So Ermes did not just simply flop press Levan and have significant success with that, but rather he opens in an outside move first, which causes Levan to have to go outside as well and try to rise up and over the top. and this ends up causing Levan to have quite a bit of separation in his elbow flexor, as well as dropping his body height. And because of all this, Levan ends up in a position that is really awkward to attempt to block your opponent's flop press. Ideally in this match, in this moment right here, when Ermi starts to come forward, Levan would have been way up higher, he would have been on his feet, and he could have blocked Ermi's press with a press of his own, with his own shoulder commitments, but he can't do that because he had to drop his body height in order to generate height to defeat Ermi's top roll. So the problem with all of this is that Jerry isn't going to open in a top roll and then transition to a flop press, but he's probably just going to flop press right off of the go, and this may not work nearly as well against Levan as something like what Ermi's did. Ermi's even discussed this strategy in an interview after this match with Levan, and he said that in one of the rounds he actually did try to just flop press off the go, and that did not work at all for him. He saw that he needed to open the match in a top roll first, and only then could he transition into the flop press. That was the only way that he was going to be able to isolate Levan's bicep in the way that he did. And finally, we're going to take a look at Ermi's versus Jerry to see what could potentially go very, very wrong for Jerry in a Jerry versus Levan match. In this match, we see Jerry attempting to shoot forward and doing his normal move, but he just gets absolutely destroyed by Ermi's from a technical standpoint here. Ermi's shows us everything you need to do to defeat a flop presser and remove their access to power. What's happening here is that Ermi's is taking a super low grip, and by taking that low grip and having a really strong cup, he's able to turn Jerry palm up almost immediately, and he's able to destroy his pronator. And whenever you're trying to press without any kind of pronation, it makes it extremely awkward and it's very difficult to access your power. So right off the go, Jerry has no kind of access to his pronation, so he is not pressing in the area that he would want to be. Ermi's is staying extremely tight and he's hooking Jerry, and he's okay if there's a big gap here. He's okay if the match goes into a hook because he's confident in his ability to roll back out once the match gets there. And that's what we see, is that even when Jerry attempts to bail out underneath, he is unable to do so because Ermi's grip is so low, it's so deep, he just can't escape. And Levan has the potential to do this to Jerry. Levan's cup is probably the strongest in the world, and if you have a really strong cup against a flop presser, it can make it really difficult for that flop presser to access their pronation. But to be fair to Jerry, Ermi's is a very, very different arm wrestler than Levan, and there's no way that Levan can physically use this same strategy, because Levan just cannot get anywhere near this close to his arm. Ermi's is over 100 pounds smaller than Levan, so he's able to get his arm way tighter, way in closer to his center mass, and he's able to do a move like this, whereas Levan could kind of do this move, but it just wouldn't be near as tight. He wouldn't have near as much shoulder commitment and access to that side pressure. So overall, I do think there is a pretty solid chance that Levan could end up in a position just like this, and Jerry could end up in a position like Ermi's is, and we could end up seeing somewhat of a long drawn-out war where Levan has to pull from this position, from this outside position, instead of just matching Jerry inside like Ermi's was able to do. So overall, I think that a Jerry CADORETTE match versus Levan SAGINASHVILI is definitely something that should happen sometime this year. There have been quite a few people saying that Jerry's just going to get destroyed, so there's no point in having the match. But I think that we also need to remember that pretty much everyone is going to get destroyed against Levan. So if Jerry gets destroyed, it's just the same thing. We might as well give him a chance just in case he's able to do something. And I think that there is at least a decent chance that Jerry could have some kind of access to power in that match. And at the very least, I think it would be a very interesting style match, and I'd love to see how Levan would deal with a flop presser. So let me know what you guys think about this potential matchup, but I personally would love to see it, and I think that Jerry just might have slightly higher chances than people are giving him credit for.